AirlineRatings.com, the world's only airline safety and product rating website, recently announced their top 25 safest full-service airlines from the 385 that they monitor. So we're cherry-picking the ones that fly the Pacific to give you the top major airlines that cover our region. Let's get ready for takeoff. Taxiing to runway 8, United Airlines. Founded in 1926, United has direct flights from the mainland US to Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, and Tahiti. The Federal Aviation Authority pledged increased oversight into the airline during 2024, following a run of instances where two separate United aircraft lost wheels and tyres during takeoff and had to then make emergency landings, and another United flight skidded off the runway. In January of 2025, a United flight from Nigeria to Washington, D.C. suffered a sudden loss of altitude, resulting in injuries to 38 passengers on board. They reported that while meal service was in progress, the aircraft dropped sharply 3 times. One passenger was knocked unconscious after hitting his head on the ceiling. Preparing for takeoff at number 7, Delta Airlines. The history of Delta Airlines began with the world's first aerial crop dusting operation, called the Haft-Darland Dusters. Delta itself started flying in 1929, with their first flight being one from Dallas to Jackson, Mississippi. The airline has direct flights from the US mainland to Australia, Hawaii, Tahiti, and New Zealand. In 2023, Delta had 2 accidents. The first was on a flight from Atlanta to Charlotte, where the plane had an issue with the nose landing gear and had to land using only the main gear and the actual nose of the aircraft. Remarkably, there were no injuries in that incident. The second accident was for a flight intended to go from Milan in Italy to JFK in New York. The plane was significantly damaged during a hailstorm and had to make an emergency landing in Rome. Then in 2024, Delta Flight 604 from Cancun to Seattle was involved in a scary safety issue when a fire broke out under the cockpit. The 189 passengers had to leave their belongings and slide urgently down the evacuation chute. Climbing to number 6, Air Canada. Founded in 1937 as Trans-Canada Airlines, Air Canada operate flights to Sydney and Brisbane, Auckland, as well as across the US and Hawaii. In terms of safety, Air Canada maintains a strong reputation. The airline adheres to strict aviation safety standards and operates a modern fleet, primarily composed of Boeing and Airbus aircraft. Air Canada's safety record is impressive, and there haven't been any major incidents in recent years. The airline is regularly ranked among the safest carriers in the world, and many passengers feel reassured by this. However, when it comes to punctuality, Air Canada does have some room for improvement. Passengers often express concern about frequent flight delays. In 2023, the airline ranked towards the middle of the pack among North American airlines for on-time performance. Air Canada did have a near miss in 2017, with a flight from Toronto to San Francisco nearly landing on a taxiway which had 4 fully loaded and fueled aircraft holding for takeoff. The runway confusion was almost the greatest aviation disaster in history, with over 1,000 passengers in all of the aircraft involved. Reaching cruising altitude at number 5, American Airlines. With direct flights to Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii, this airline is the largest in the United States in terms of passenger volume. In 2024, an American Airlines flight from LAX to Sydney was forced to turn back an hour or so into its flight when a warning light for the cargo door being open came on. The crew were concerned about the cabin becoming depressurized. Historically, American Airlines Flight 191 from Chicago to Los Angeles, it crashed in 1979 with a loss of 273 people. That disaster is the deadliest aviation accident to have occurred in the United States. The airline also suffered the loss of Flight 587 from JFK to the Dominican Republic in 2001, where 260 passengers and another 5 people on the ground were also killed. The airline has more recently been involved in the tragic accident on approach to Washington, D.C.'s Ronald Reagan Airport, where a collision with a Black Hawk Army helicopter resulted in the deaths of 67 people. Descending into number 4, Hawaiian Airlines. Direct flights to Australia, New Zealand, American Samoa and Tahiti, Hawaiian has made some headlines in recent years in no fault of its own due to being hit by severe turbulence. A flight from Honolulu to Sydney in 2023 was hit by extreme winds halfway across its flight, resulting in injuries to 4 passengers and 3 flight attendants. A flight from Phoenix to Honolulu the previous year encountered extreme clear air turbulence, with 36 passengers injured and 20 of them ending up in hospital. Landing on runway 3, Virgin Australia. Australia's second largest carrier can take you from down under to Fiji, New Zealand, Samoa and Vanuatu. They are yet to add their Sydney to LAX flight back to their menu since COVID, a time which saw the airline dramatically decrease their list of destinations. Formed in 2000 by Richard Branson as Virgin Blue, the airline operates hubs in Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney, and are the main competitor to Australia's major airline, Qantas. Virgin Australia has not been involved in any major accidents, but recent incidents include a 2022 flight from Brisbane to Melbourne with 177 people on board, which took off from a closed section of runway due to a distraction and a misinterpretation of the dispatcher notes. In a more unusual incident, a Virgin flight from Melbourne to Brisbane hit both a bird and a rabbit in the air at the same time. An eagle carrying a rabbit hit their number 1 engine as the flight was making its initial climb. Now, bird strikes are fairly common, with 1 in every 2,000 flights impacted. But what are the chances of hitting a bird and a rabbit at the same time? I guess for the crew, that was a hair-raising experience. Taxiing into number 2, it's the Flying Kangaroo, Qantas. Founded as the Queensland and Northern Territory Aerial Service in 1920, Australia's national airline has direct flights to many Pacific destinations, including the US, Canada, Tonga and Samoa. The airline merged with Australian Airlines in 1992 and was privatised between 1993 and 1997. Under legislation, it must be at least 51% owned by Australian shareholders. Qantas has not been involved in a fatal crash since 1951, and the last time one of its flights was lost in Australia was way back in 1944. A flight from Sydney to Manila in the Philippines was diverted to Cairns in January of 2025 due to fumes in the cabin, and a flight from LAX to Brisbane in December of 24 suffered a right engine stall, with passengers and crew hearing a loud bang and sparks observed from the engine. The flight returned to LAX safely, where metal debris was found in the engine exhaust pipe. Now, Qantas has always proudly held to the highest standard of aviation safety and has a reputation globally as one of the world's safest airlines to fly. Before we get to our number 1 airline, I did want to mention another that, despite not making the list, has been making huge headways in all areas of aviation. With 0 incidents recorded over the past 7 years and a passenger satisfaction rating that beats all other Pacific airlines, Fiji Airways were voted the 2024 Skytrax Best Airline in Australia and the Pacific, and Best Airline Staff Service for the same regions. Formerly known as Air Pacific, it was founded in 1947 and is majority owned by the Fijian government, with Australia's Qantas airline also holding a 16% stake. Arriving into gate number 1, it's on to the safest airline in the Pacific, and it's from the land of the long white cloud, Air New Zealand. It was extremely close again between Air New Zealand and Qantas for first place, with only 1.5 points separating the 2 airlines. Whilst both airlines uphold the highest safety standards and pilot training, Air New Zealand continue to have a younger fleet than what Qantas does, and that's what really separates the 2 airlines. Founded in 1940 as Tasman Empire Airways, Air New Zealand have a stellar safety record and are rated as the safest airline in the world. The only time the airline had a crash that involved fatalities was almost 50 years ago, in 1979, when a flight flew into Mount Erebus on Ross Island, with 230 passengers and 20 crew on board all being killed during a sightseeing trip over Antarctica. Now, the airline flies into such airports as Wellington, which is one of the windiest airports in the world, and Queenstown, which is known to be hugely challenging for navigation. The airline has focused on the latest technology, and its aircraft are state-of-the-art in that respect. With direct flights all across the Pacific, including to the Cook Islands, Tahiti, the US and Canada, Air New Zealand have this part of the world well covered. With amazing service, comfortable seating, and the best safety record in the world, this airline's commitment to safety, transparency, and continuous improvement makes it a standout in the region.
Fanciful imaginings. But I'll have you know, Middle Earth is closer than you think.
Fear of flying is fairly common. As many as 40% of people experience it. But how safe is it to travel on a plane? Between 2018 and 2022, there was a 1 in almost 14 million chance of being killed in an air crash. In comparison, it's estimated that 1.2 million fatalities from road accidents occurred in 2023, equating to more than 2 deaths every minute. The United States, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada are all top-tier countries when it comes to air safety. We live in a part of the world where safety is paramount and air travel necessary to reach the vast distances of the Pacific Ocean. Stay safe, happy flying, and I'll catch you next time on From Down Under to Down South. Hooroo, mateys.